Grandmother kept these letters for 70 years, perfectly aware of what exactly was hunting Isabelle in the woods. Charlotte sat on the dusty floorboards of the attic, the dry heat of the Quebec summer pressing down on her neck, though her skin had gone clammy and cold. The heavy iron padlock of the chest lay broken beside her knee, a violation she had committed with a hammer and a screwdriver just 20 minutes ago. Inside the chest, the history of the Beaumont family had been neatly bifurcated. On the left lay a stack of 43 letters, written on yellowed parchment in frantic, elegant French by a woman named Isabelle Mercier. On the right lay a leather-bound journal, the spine cracked and worn, belonging to Margarite Beaumont, Charlotte's grandmother. Charlotte had spent the last hour reading Isabelle's letters. They were a chronology of descending madness and terror, detailing a woman being stalked by figures in the forest, the men of the moon, who demanded something from her. Isabelle had written to Marguerite as a friend, a cousin, a savior. She wrote of hiding in the barn, of scratching at the back door, of begging for sanctuary. Charlotte's hands trembled as she reached for the journal on the right. She had grown up believing Marguerite was a saint, a stoic, hard-working woman who had survived the war alone in this farmhouse, raising a daughter and protecting their legacy. But the letters painted a different picture. Isabelle's letters were not addressed to a distant relative. They were pleas sent to this very house, often referencing Marguerite standing in the window. A heavy, sickening choice settled in Charlotte's stomach. A box of Strike Anywhere matches sat on the windowsill, left there decades ago. It would be so easy. She could strike a match, burn the contents of the chest, and sell the property as she had planned. She could drive back to Montreal, deposit the check, and remember Marguerite as the woman who baked sugar pies and knitted wool socks. To read the diary was to invite a poison into her bloodline. It was to acknowledge that the woman she loved might have been a monster. But the silence of the farmhouse felt accusatory. The dust motes dancing in the shaft of light looked like suspended ash. Charlotte felt the weight of Isabelle's terror in the room, a ghost demanding a witness. She picked up the journal. She did not open it randomly. She looked at the date on the first frantic letter from Isabelle, June 12, 1940. Charlotte's fingers, stained with the grime of the attic, turned the brittle pages of the diary until she found the matching entry. The ink was dark, the handwriting firm and unwavering, a stark contrast to Isabelle's shaky scrawl. Charlotte took a breath that tasted of stale air and dead flies, and she began to read. The choice was made. The match remained unlit, and the comfortable history of the Beaumont family began to dissolve. The descent into the truth was not a sudden drop, but a suffocating, methodical slide. Charlotte arranged the documents on the floorboards, a letter on the left, the diary entry on the right. She acted as the judge in a silent court, cross-referencing the testimony of the dead. Letter, August 4th, 1940. Marguerite, please. I saw them again by the creek. They wore the masks made of bone. I ran until my lungs burned. I pounded on your pantry door until my knuckles bled. I saw the candle moving in the kitchen. I know you were there. Why did not you open it? They are getting closer. Charlotte felt bile rise in her throat. She looked at the diary. Diary, August 4th, 1940. She came again tonight. The pounding was loud enough to wake the dead, but I have packed the cotton into the window frames to dull the sound. I sat by the stove and waited for her to stop. Took an hour. She cried my name. It is difficult to listen to, but I must remain firm. The lock held. The house remained pure. Charlotte gasped, dropping the book as if it were burning hot. She scrambled backward, her back hitting the rough wood of the attic wall. It was not negligence. It was not fear of the authorities. It was a calculated exclusion. Marguerite had sat in her warm kitchen, perhaps drinking tea, listening to her cousin scream in the darkness just a few meters away. Charlotte looked around the attic. The shadows stretched long and distorted in the afternoon light. This was not just a farmhouse. It was a fortress designed to keep one specific person out. Every memory Charlotte had of this place, playing tag in the yard, sleeping in the guest room, was now tainted. She had played on the ground where Isabelle had been hunted. She had slept within walls that had been barred against a dying woman. She forced herself to crawl back to the papers. She needed to understand why. Was Margarite afraid the men would kill her too? Was it cowardice? She read on month after month. The pattern was gruesome. Isabelle would find a temporary hiding spot, the root cellar, the hayloft, the old well. She would write of her starvation, her frostbite. And Margarite would write of her daily chores, noting Isabelle's presence like a weather report. Diary, November 1941. Found traces of her in the barn. She has been stealing eggs. I put a new padlock on the coop. She must not be fed. Weakness will make it end sooner. Make it end sooner. The phrase echoed in Charlotte's mind. Margarite was not just ignoring Isabelle. She was participating in the siege. She was starving the prey to make it easier for the predators. Charlotte stood up, her legs numb. She paced the length of the attic, her boots thudding against the floor. She felt a profound sense of isolation. The farmhouse was miles from the nearest town, just as it had been then. The geography that had made the property so peaceful to Charlotte was the same geography that had doomed Isabelle. She returned to the final set of documents. The last letter. The one that ended mid-sentence. December 8th, 1945. They are at the door, and I cannot run anymore because... Charlotte opened the diary to December 8th. She expected to read about guilt, or perhaps relief that the ordeal was over. She expected a confession of fear. But as her eyes scanned the neat cursive, the floor seemed to drop out from under her. The room spun. The evil she had uncovered was not passive cruelty. It was something far more active and far more transactional. The diary entry for December 8th did not describe a death. It described a receipt. Diary, December 8th, 1945. It is done. The circle came for her just after midnight. I unlocked the mudroom door as agreed. She was hiding behind the woodpile, too weak to fight. They did not drag her. They carried her like a bride. The elder paused on the steps and nodded to me. The debt is cleared. The farm is secure. The blight that took the Miller family and the Trembleys will pass over this house. My belly is full, and the child I carry, Isabelle's drifting spirit, will ensure her strength. It was a necessary trade. One confused soul for the prosperity of the bloodline. We are safe now, forever. Charlotte read the paragraph 3 times. Her breath came in short, sharp hitches. It was not just about survival. It was a deal. Pact. Margarite had not locked Isabelle out because she was afraid of the men in the woods. Margarite was the one who had unlocked the door to let them in. She had fattened the calf, or rather weakened it, preparing it for the slaughter. The men in the woods. This cult, this circle of rural occultists that the police had dismissed as superstition, were real. And Margarite was an affiliate. But the horror did not stop at the history. Charlotte's eyes fixated on the line. The child I carry. Margarite was pregnant in December 1945. Pregnant with Charlotte's mother. Charlotte's entire existence. Her life, her career in Montreal, her health, the very beat of her heart, was the dividend of this transaction. Isabelle Mercier had not just died. She had been used as currency to purchase safety and prosperity for Margarite's descendants. Charlotte looked at her own hands. They felt foreign. She felt a sudden, violent urge to scrub her skin, to peel away the layers of DNA that connected her to the woman who had written these words. The house suddenly felt alive, pulsating with a dark, rhythmic energy. The silence of the attic was broken by the creaking of the timber, a sound that sounded suspiciously like a chuckle. She realized with a jolt why she had inherited the house. It was not just an asset. It was the altar. The safety Margarite had purchased was tied to this land. By coming here, by taking ownership, Charlotte was accepting the terms of the contract. She stood up, grabbing the keys to her car. She needed to leave. She would drive to the police station, hand over the evidence, and never return. She rushed to the attic stairs, but her foot caught on the heavy iron chest. She stumbled, falling hard against the floorboards. As she lay there, cheek pressed against the rough wood. She saw something carved into the baseboard, hidden behind where the chest had sat for 70 years. It was a symbol, a circle with 3 intersecting lines, etched deep into the wood, dark with what looked like dried oil or blood. It was fresh. Not fresh from 1945, fresh from now. The wood was raw. Charlotte froze. Margarite had died months ago. She had lived alone. Who had carved the symbol? The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. The circle was not a relic of the war. It had not dissolved in 1946. It was a lineage just like hers. The neighbors who had warned her away, the old man who claimed the topic was taboo, they were not protecting the memory of the victims. They were protecting the continuity of the pact. They knew she was here. They knew she had found the letters. The isolation of the farmhouse was not a buffer. It was the walls of the pen, and she was no longer the farmer. She was the new Isabelle. Panic flared, bright and hot, but Charlotte forced it down. She was not Isabelle. She was not a frightened seamstress in the 1940s with nowhere to go. She was a modern woman, and she knew exactly what this house was. It was not a home. It was a cancer. She pulled herself up. The pain in her knee was grounding. She looked at the diary and the letters scattered on the floor. If she left now, if she ran to the police, the local authorities, the descendants of the very people who allowed this to happen would bury it. They would call the letters a hoax, the diary the ramblings of a senile woman. The cycle would continue. Someone else would buy the farm. The circle would find a new tenant to torment or a new partner to bargain with. Charlotte realized that the inheritance was not the property. The inheritance was the sin. And the only way to pay off a debt of blood was to destroy the ledger. She did not run to the car. She ran to the maintenance closet on the 2nd floor. She found the red jerry cans of gasoline her grandmother kept for the backup generator. They were heavy, full. The smell of the fuel was sharp and chemical, cutting through the scent of old dust and decay. It smelled like cleansing. Charlotte moved with cold precision. She uncapped the first can in the attic. She poured the pink fluid over the chest, soaking the dark wood. She splashed it over the pile of letters, watching the ink of Isabelle's terror dissolve into a blur. She drowned the diary, the pages drinking up the gasoline, erasing the neat, sociopathic confession of her grandmother. She moved down the stairs, trailing a line of fuel. She soaked the curtains in the master bedroom where Marguerite had slept soundly while Isabelle screamed outside. She poured the rest in the kitchen, coating the pantry door, the door that had remained locked. The fumes made her dizzy, but her mind was crystal clear. She reached the front porch, the empty cans clattering down the steps. The sun was setting, casting long, blood-red shadows across the fields. At the edge of the forest, about 200 meters away, she saw movement. Figures, standing just inside the tree line, watching. They were waiting to see if she would honor the pact, if she would take her place as the new matriarch of the slaughterhouse. Charlotte stood on the porch, the box of Strike Anywhere matches in her hand. She locked eyes with the darkness between the trees. She did not tremble. "The debt is cancelled," she whispered. She struck the match against the box. It flared to life, a tiny tongue of yellow fire. She flicked it through the open front door. The fumes caught instantly. A whoosh of air was sucked past her as the hallway ignited. The fire roared, hungry and violent, racing up the stairs, consuming the dry, seasoned timber of the frame. The heat was immediate and intense, pushing her off the porch. Charlotte backed away, walking backwards down the gravel driveway. The farmhouse transformed into a pillar of flame. The windows blew out, shattering the silence of the countryside. The roof groaned and began to sag. She watched the attic window. For a second, amidst the inferno, she thought she saw a silhouette. Not a terrified woman, but the dark, heavy shape of a chest disintegrating into ash. She turned to the forest. The figures were gone, retreated. There was no sanctuary for them here anymore. No altar, no deals to be made. Charlotte got into her car, the heat of the fire warming her face through the glass. She did not look at the rearview mirror as she drove away. She had lost her family history, her inheritance, and her innocence. But as the smoke rose into the twilight sky, thick and black, she knew she had given Isabelle the only thing that mattered: fire and silence.